options you have for attacking and moving around in this game is staggering. Honestly, pretty overwhelming to talk about, especially when the game throws all this stuff at you in the middle of like a chase sequence. There's moments where you're just not gonna know what to do. You're gonna flail around uselessly for a while, just trying to figure out what the game wants you to do.
One has one of the most nonsensical gibberish plots I've seen in any media ever, and that includes fucking Kingdom Hearts. It all kinda makes sense up until this guy shows up. After that, things just happen. It has been almost 5 years since I last played it, but I remember it's one of those stories where you gotta read a wiki afterwards to figure out what you just watched.
What is going on? What is going on?
The visuals. I'm a firm believer that art style trumps fidelity every time, and the art direction definitely does a lot of the heavy lifting here, but the lack of polish is still undeniably prevalent.
Doesn't villainize Viola. If Bayonetta had used teamwork from the beginning, then we wouldn't have had to endure any contrived deaths. No character is being stupid for the sake of the plot moving forward. An actual impact when Brave Cereza dies, instead of Platinum Games trying to gaslight us into believing it was meaningful because she does a pretty dance.
That's what it's all about. Woo!
Missions or whatever. But even the core gameplay itself, you're just fighting the same 5 enemies over and over and over. At least for the first 2 hours, you were literally fighting like 5 enemies in the same formations. You can just use the same strats every time. And the strategy goes like this. Swing, swing, swing. Hit them with your wet noodle of a weapon. Not a lot of hit stun's gonna go on. You know, they're just gonna tank it.
Bayonetta 3 is the only game that can be 5 years in development without a single word being released, and it actually be playable on launch day, which in turn made it have a very successful release. Nowadays it seems like every game at launch is an absolute train wreck and a buggy disaster, but Bayonetta 3 luckily didn't fall into that same trap. Now, I have seen a lot of negative Nancys complaining about Bayonetta, which I will address later on in the video. In this video, I'm going to be explaining why Bayonetta 3 is a masterpiece alongside Bayonetta and Bayonetta 2.
I beg your pardon?
Guys, I know. How can I say such a thing? How can I say it's a masterpiece when we got things like the trashing of Bayonetta's character, the horrible Viola gameplay, and the diminished overall presentation of Bayonetta? I'm going to be addressing all of that, and I will do it in a way where you can see how I have viewed Bayonetta 3 after spending months playing it. We're going to be diving into questions like, how has the gameplay evolved? What is Bayonetta's 3 identity? How has the writing of the story progressed, and has it gotten any better? If the music is still great, which spoiler alert, it is, and why am I forced to play as Viola but not as Jean, who everybody wants to play as? Also, something that we're going to be addressing is how the presentation style comes into play as to why we perceive Bayonetta 3 the way that we do. As someone who spent a lot of time playing Bayonetta 1, 2, and 3, I'm going to be laying the case for why Bayonetta 3 is not only a masterpiece, but it is a better game than 1 and 2. Now, after Bayonetta 3 got a teaser trailer in 2017 at the Game Awards confirming a third game, the entire world was ecstatic, and Bayonetta fans could rejoice that our favorite femme fatale would be returning. The trailer built up intrigue and mystery. Now, what did Platinum Games do right after they released this trailer for Bayonetta 3? Like, complete radio silence. And I get it, Platinum Games has more games and projects that they are working on all the time. But to not even put out a tweet saying you're still working on it and it not dropping some sort of information until like a few months before releases is a baffling business decision. I mean, there was literally a Twitter account dedicated to how many days went by until we got some sort of news about Bayonetta 3. I guess a lot of the problem of developing Bayonetta 3 and why it had taken them, so long, was that there was a lot of discussion on where they wanted to take Bayonetta and what new game mechanics that they wanted to change and introduce. Given the fact that they were also working on developing other games during this time, I can see why it took them for so long to even say anything about it. Plus, it is on the Switch, and we all know how making a game on the Switch goes for a lot of developers. When it comes to Bayonetta 3 and the franchise as a whole, let's get something straight, and that is you are not supposed to take the story seriously at all. Like, if you actually play Bayonetta for the story, you are missing the point. It is about the spectacle, not about winning the best narrative direction at the Game Awards. Now, I get it, we all expect a lot from video games when it comes to storytelling. But Bayonetta has never been about telling the most amazing story you will ever witness. It is about the moments, the grand theatrics, and the bombastic spectacles. However, this still doesn't save it from criticism, and I recognize this. But I will counter that a lot of people have been critiquing it too harshly. So rather than completely break down the entire story, because there are already people who have done that way better than I ever could, and I will link those videos to the people who have explained it or can tell you the entire story beat by beat, instead, I will be breaking down how this story requires a completely new set of expectations to understand and why it isn't like the stories told in Bayonetta 1 and 2. First, in order to do that, we're going to have to start with the beginning of the game and how it actually sets up the story framework for Bayonetta 3 right from the start.
When I was a kid, my father used to tell me something. There are no forks in the road of life. You just walk along, feeling your way through the grass and leaving a faint path behind. But if you turn around to look, you may get the strange feeling you've walked that path before. Or that someone was walking along with you, lending you the strength to press on. I'd always believed there was only one truth, but what if some other version of me on a distant world was searching for all possibilities? And what if, when all the possibilities were overlaid, the path that stood out the clearest was the real truth? What he was saying, but for some reason, it really resonated with me. And every time I thought about it, I looked up at the sky and daydreamed. What if somewhere, some version of me was walking along through the grass just like me? Could we be following the same path, taking the same journey? That idea had its hooks in me more powerfully than any anime or sci-fi novel. And even after growing up, I still believed it could be true. I just knew that someday a version of my father from some other world would appear and pull out a strawberry candy just for me, always used to. But the visitor from another world that appeared to me was a nightmare that had come to crush all hope like blades of grass beneath his heel.
Done yet. What's wrong? Having trouble running the numbers? Come out just yet. I'll be the one who decides. The truth will be.
Stay back! You have a job to do, soldier. This is our last world bridge. You know what to do.
Sigurd! Bastard!
You start the game as Bayonetta fighting off a mysterious antagonist. Here we get to see Bayonetta looking a bit down on her luck. What should have been an easy enemy for her to dispute appears to now be a fight for her life. The city of New York is absolutely obliterated, and it is clear that this conflict is bigger than anything we've ever seen before. The two face off, and that is when Bayonetta summons Gamora, and the mysterious figure sends down its own creation to join the face-off. As Gamora and the large figure fight, the mysterious antagonist shows us his power and changes reality, and the fight begins. Gamora defeats their opponent, but Bayonetta struggles with hers. As she stops time, she catches the antagonist off guard momentarily before the antagonist catches her off guard and blasts her. Her watch is broken and Bayonetta is caught. She doesn't give up, and even when she can't physically stand, she fights on. Eventually, it is too much, even for Bayonetta, and she is restrained by the antagonist's power. The camera cuts to two figures, a young woman and a soldier. Both are distraught and can't believe that Bayonetta lost. The young woman can't let Bayonetta die, but the soldier reminds her that she has a job to do. Bayonetta yells out in pain as she is slowly crushed. Can't take it anymore, the young woman calls out to Bayonetta. Bayonetta, seeing her fate is near, gives what is left of her power to this woman before telling her to go. Bayonetta is then given a cruel death. The same fate befalls the soldier. The young woman is then forced to leave and run away from the antagonist, but promises to return and set things right. Now, if you played Bayonetta before, this prologue setup should be familiar to you as you start the game this way in 1 and 2. Not only is this used as an introduction to all the game's mechanics you'll be using throughout the game, but it also sets up for the premise of the story and also is the exposition dump. What makes this prologue different from Bayonetta 1 and 2 is that it breaks the game's norms as it not only sets up the premise for the story, it sets up the stakes for Bayonetta and also throws the player into an intense fight and gives them a whole lot of questions as they will want answers later on. But this is also the first time where the events take place in real time and not some flashback of the past or whatever Bayonetta 2 prologue was. The player wouldn't have been able to be invested in the stakes of the story if this was a flashback. We need to see Bayonetta get her ass kicked and see that the threat is very real. This was actually a smart decision as now the game has a chance to expand upon the threat as the game progresses, and for us as the player to further see just how powerful the threat is and makes the player wonder just how Bayonetta is going to overcome this challenge. This was a great way to set up the story, and I do believe this is the most dangerous villain created for Bayonetta in the franchise's history. Also, I love Viola's dialogue throughout. I felt that was a very good decision and also very different because no others they do have some overlap, with the narrator, but Viola was not narrating a story, if you know what I mean. Now, after these events, we are then transported to another world, or should I say, another New York City. In contrast to the one we were just in, this one is bright, colorful, and lively. We get to enjoy the moment, and also look at this drastic change of scenery, and also try to contemplate what we just witnessed beforehand. After a while, we are met with the familiar swagger of a certain someone. That someone is none other than Bayonetta herself. She looks different or familiar to one we have seen before. She walks throughout the city and enjoys its beauty. We also meet our good buddy Enzo, who is behaving as an Enzo should be, but he too has a different appearance. Here is where we get the two bantering, normal Bayonetta and Enzo dynamic, and we learn that Enzo has been Bayonetta's chauffeur the entire day because of a job she did for him, much to Enzo's displeasure. Their banter is still the same as ever, but Bayonetta keeps remarking that she has to be somewhere, and that she is pressed for time. That somewhere is a cruise ship, and as for the time, she is unsure. Also for the reason, she is unsure why she has to be there at that certain time. She just knows she has to be there. When Enzo presses Bayonetta more about this, she orders Enzo not to move under any circumstances. With that, she boards a cruise ship and waits. After a while, a huge tear in the sky opens, and from it, the young woman we've met before falls from the sky. She lands right on top of a waiting Enzo, who had assumed that it was the work of Paradiso. He is confused when this woman falls on him. Then she frantically demands for him to take her to Bayonetta before passing out. It is from here that everything is... A huge tsunami wave approaches New York City. It casts a looming shadow as the citizens run for safety. Enzo himself is panicking as he tries to get his car to start. People run in a panic as this huge tidal wave approaches their beloved city. However, a momentary hero emerges. Rodon takes a break from slinging pizza to deliver a punch with the power of hell to whatever is causing this tsunami. This momentarily pushes it back, but not outright stops it. Rodon remarks about how this is definitely not what he is used to. Bayonetta on the cruise ship passes by, and the two remark about Bayonetta's orders. The huge tsunami decimates the city, and Bayonetta is attacked by these creatures. She easily deals with them in hand-to-hand combat before her clothes are destroyed. And it is here where we get the best opening sequence in the entire franchise. It is the first mission while fighting on this yacht that we are getting familiar with the game mechanics and the combat system that you will be using throughout the entire game. After more encounters and John coming to Bayonetta's aid to defeat a demon, we head to the Gates of Hell to figure out what the hell is going on. It is here that we are introduced to Viola, a mysterious young woman who enlightens the group on the threat at hand. The homunculi are man-made bioweapons that were created by a person called Singularity. After John shoots at Viola, who is able to use Wish Time to protect herself, Viola explains that she is from another universe and that she has met them before. But she also explains that they both died and soon everyone else will. She explains that this being Singularity was able to discover the idea of a multiverse before anyone else and developed a way to travel between universes. He called his universe the Alphaverse, and his goal is to fuse all the universes together into a single universe that he himself rules over. At first, Bayonetta and John scoffed this off, but Rodon was quick to say that with power like that, Singularity would be able to wipe out everything in a single move, including Paradiso and Inferno, meaning that he could wipe out existence as we know it. Viola explains that Bayonetta needs to find these MacGuffins called Chaos Gears as they're needed to gain entry into the Alphaverse. She then tells John that she must find a person called Dr. Sigurd, who is the only person capable of knowing how to use them. And that Bayonetta has her objective, saving the multiverse from total annihilation. The entire first hour of Bayonetta is nothing we have seen in a Bayonetta game so far, and it takes us in a direction we could never see coming. Instead of it being saving the world or humanity, Bayonetta is tasked with saving the entirety of existence. It is never explained why, out of all the Bayonettas across the multiverse, why this specific Bayonetta we are playing as has to be the one to find the Chaos Gears, nor does it matter in the grand scheme of the story. This is the Bayonetta we are playing as, and therefore she is the one the story is focusing on. Now, I mentioned earlier in the prologue about setting the stakes of a story and why we should care. With the first Bayonetta game, the stakes weren't clear from the start, so a lot of the things we find out happen just as Bayonetta finds out. Hell, for a long time in the beginning, we weren't even sure about what we were supposed to be doing or why we had to find the left out of the world. But because of the mysterious circumstances and our ability to form an emotional investment in Bayonetta's journey on her path to finding out her identity and who she is, we were able to disregard this flaw in storytelling and still be invested. In Bayonetta 2, the stakes were set from the start from the very beginning, and that the stakes was to save John's soul. However, once we completed that goal, we are then suddenly thrown into a whole new set of stakes that we were not even worried about from the start. It is such a jarring switch that we can't even form any emotional investment in it and don't really care that Lopter wants to destroy humanity or whatever. For 3/4 of the game, we struggled to get to Inferno to save John. Each challenge kept us from saving her. Every boss battle was our roadblock to save John before it was too late. Therefore, we formed an emotional investment in the journey and we wanted to see Bayonetta save her best friend despite the constant struggles. That is all we cared about. But when we have to suddenly care about saving humanity after completing a whole separate journey you spent hours investing us in, it doesn't work. What Bayonetta 3 did was executing the importance of setting the stakes is also having to rely on that specific goal. Okay? You cannot divert, otherwise it doesn't work. So what they had us do was meet the other Bayonettas and watch them die as their universe is then wiped from existence. We can't save their universe, but maybe if we get the Chaos Gears, we can save the others. That is why we care about what we are doing. We are actively participating in Bayonetta's journey and thus we have an emotional investment in what is happening. Again, also something crucial here is that we never shift or suddenly pivot from this direction because of reasons. One of the biggest complaints about the story is how Bayonetta lost what made her special, and that is just an absurd complaint, especially since it is not true at all. Bayonetta is still Bayonetta. Now, you could argue that her sexiness and femdom attitude is toned down a bit, but I think that is appropriate given the circumstances and the new dynamics they introduce. Bayonetta still keeps her sexy presentation, and she is still as dominant as ever, and she still has her one-liners and quips.
You have no fucking right to call me by that name!
Speaking of new dynamics, the writers took a risk in the story by presenting a mother-daughter dynamic. With the addition of Viola and having Bayonetta become like a motherly figure, but sort of not because she is the daughter of Bayonetta in the Otherverse, which would then make Bayonetta actually her real mother because Bayonetta is technically the same as all the other Bayonettas, which then means every other Bayonetta has a daughter that they aren't aware of. The point is that Bayonetta in the midst of saving the multiverse takes Viola under her wing, teaching her what it means to be an Umbra Witch. She doesn't undermine Viola's abilities, but rather pushes her to her limits in order for her to grow and be the best. She doesn't coddle her. She sees Viola as a young woman and treats her as such. She doesn't sit and baby her at all. We get these moments between them and we can see how their relationship grows over the course of the game. Viola has to sometimes rein in certain things when she doesn't want to reveal because she doesn't want Bayonetta to know that she's talking to her daughter, and we can see how this is withholding a lot of information and how this actually affects their dynamic and how Viola views Bayonetta, while Bayonetta just views Viola as this annoying young woman who is just being annoying. Another new dynamic they introduced was finally exploring what a romantic relationship would look like between Luca and Cereza. This dynamic was teased throughout both games, with Bayonetta ultimately turning him down and rejecting his advancements. But in this game, they treated their relationship in the best way they could have done. The two of them flirt, and Bayonetta winning each and every time by saving him. You know, the usual way. Bayonetta tasks Viola with looking after Luca while she goes on her mission to find the MacGuffins that Viola told her to find. It is clear that this Bayonetta cares for Luca and is more open to his advancements, but she still plays hard to get. She doesn't make it easy for him. The romance is also implied, as it's later revealed that Cereza and Luca in Viola's universe are her parents. At the end of the game, we see Luca sacrificing himself to save Bayonetta's soul after she sacrifices herself to save the multiverse. This progression of the relationship didn't really feel forced at all, and it just felt very abrupt in introduction. Like when I first thought, oh, we're doing this now? I didn't know that we were going to be doing that. A lot of people also made a big deal about this and said that their headcanon of, John and Bayonetta getting together, becoming the ultimate lesbian power couple was destroyed. But honestly, I don't care about that. I love the dynamic because at the end of the day, Bayonetta can still kick Luca's ass if she wanted to. Like, he's literally a fly on her shoulder. Even with Luca's new power, he is no match for her at all. I mean, we did spend the majority of the game trying to save him while also beating his ass at the same time. Not to mention, Luca only comes to Bayonetta's rescue towards the end of the game. And no hardcore feminist, this doesn't mean that Bayonetta needed a man to come to her rescue. Bayonetta needed help and Luca provided that. Bayonetta still dealt the final blow and was kicking Singularity's ass well before Luca got here. I mean, she was also kicking Luca's ass, several times. The only thing I wish the writers did was set up this relationship more directly in the beginning, as it does come out of nowhere essentially. But had they just introduced this at the very first cutscene, it would have been fine, and they could have built upon it throughout the entire game. Also, wait, before we move on, can we also talk about this iconic moment of not only fighting as the first Bayonetta, but then the Bayonettas fusing together and we fight as all of them at once?
You didn't cry while I was gone, did you? You all seem to be having a good time. Awfully rude of you not to invite me, don't you think? Women of our caliber don't need invitations, darling. Right.
What are you doing? I destroyed the worlds long ago. It is not possible. That phenomenon once before now changing.
It looks like only the three of us made it this far. Oh, and the young lady, of course. That's enough, yes? To prove phenomenal affirmation isn't absolute after all. Alright, Lady Care. Just try to predict what the lot of us will do next. Ready? Do it. Perhaps you're not a visual learner. I'll teach you the hard way. Let's dance! Finish them!
As it comes to the story the writers wanted to tell was one about self-sacrifice, loss, persevering through impossible odds, and familial bonds. I understand that most were not expecting them to take Bayonetta's story this way, but when you look at the previous game, I find it refreshing that they were not afraid to take a risk. A risk I think paid off when you look at things as a whole and not just particular instances and comparing it to other particular instances. Now, does the story need work to address some things? Of course it does. But at the end of the day, the writers told the story they wanted to tell. If you see this story play out and place the same expectations from Bayonetta 1 and 2, you will completely miss the point of the story they were trying to tell.